Okay, the reading for the sermon today is taken from Matthew. This is actually part of the Sermon on the Mount. This is a section entitled Concerning Anger. Jesus is speaking. He says, "You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, 'You fool,' you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your sister or brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your sister or brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny." So, I want to talk about anger, and this is something that I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out, because I was one of those angry young men type people. And things have become a lot clearer. I think God is very efficient in the creation of a human being. So the fact that we have the capacity to feel angry, to me, is not a problem. It is actually a very useful emotion because it gives indication to something that we have perceived. Typically, if we have felt mistreated, if we have felt that a line has been crossed, then the reaction inside is one of anger. I don't know how to describe it. It's a pressure. It's a release of a chemical. But our consciousness receives it as though something has happened that I don't feel right about, I don't feel good about. And now, okay, that's the moment where I believe what Jesus is teaching is important. That if we then feel the right to insult a brother, to disconnect from somebody, to retaliate against somebody, now we've brought about, difficulty for ourselves. So the question is, what is the correct approach? Because, as I've shared with you, the further you go on this path, the more you will recognize the incredibly subtle ways in which we human beings transgress against the dignity of each other. And, there are many people who, when they hear about things that are happening to the environment, they're outraged. When you hear about children that are being, sex trafficked, it stirs up an incredible feeling of anger because there is the sense that this is not right, that an individual that is helpless, that is innocent, is being, mistreated badly, like in ways that are unfathomable. And many times I've had conversations with people that are just like, I can't even believe, they talk about something that their partner did, or their boss did, or their friend did, and it's like, it just doesn't, how is that even possible? How is it possible that somebody could do something that we experience as such an affront against our dignity, and the other person has virtually no consciousness about it? Well, there's a couple of very logical explanations. One is that many people become buffered against anger by shutting down their love, and that translates to things don't really matter. Somebody who's indifferent about stuff will not necessarily be in tune with how their actions affect you, who we strive to be the opposite of indifferent. We strive to love. We love the earth, we love our brothers and sisters, we love God, we love ourselves, we love animals, we love plants, we love the things that God has created. And we want to turn that on to the max. When you turn on love to the max, you become very vulnerable because things really matter to you. When things don't matter to you, then it's very hard to affect the person. So that's a protective modality because it's not the normal state for a human being to be indifferent to things. But it's interesting how indifference will actually, it's a form of anger, really. It's a form of like, well, I don't care. But it's a passive form of anger, which elicits anger in other people. Because if somebody doesn't care about something that you care about, then that's angry. Because in a way, it's devaluing that which you have valued. And so we get angry about that. And I don't think there's a problem with that, because that's that's the human being indicating that love is important to us. What matters to me, what I love is important. If I shut down the love function, I shut down the feminine in me. And we have a world that is, very much shut down on the feminine. And that's not a balanced world. It's a problematic world. And it's a world in which anger and retaliation, as a result of being mistreated, is kind of celebrated, which is very discouraging because the teaching is very clear that that is not the way. So then we, as seekers on the path, have to develop a new relationship to respond to the anger. I will never teach that you shouldn't get angry because I don't believe in that. I don't believe in trying to control your emotions. I believe in managing your emotions when you become aware of them. It's a big difference. If people apologize because they got angry, to a certain degree, that's a violation against their God-given right to recognize the truth. Somebody walks into a room and slaps me across the face for no reason, and I get angry. I shouldn't say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I got angry." That doesn't make any sense. But I may decide not to retaliate because I'm striving to follow this teaching. So now, we have to learn a method by which we process that anger rather than do what the world is calling us to do, which is to retaliate, which is to, some of these YouTubes are about, they just want to celebrate anger. It's like, well, here's the 20 worst road rage incidences, and they just, people, I want to sit there and watch this person get furious. Or, watch these 5 criminals get life sentences and watch their reaction. It's really quite sad that people get glee out of seeing other people in this state. So we have to learn a higher conscious approach to managing our anger. And of course, Jesus is always the example. The best moment I always think of is when they're nailing, spikes through his bone and flesh. And whether it was right at that moment or later on, he says, "Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do." So there is an element where we have to recognize that somebody acting indifferent to something that's important to us, somebody crossing a line, generally, I would say, I'm going to go with a high number, like 90% of the time, people are not really conscious of what they are doing. They are not setting out to injure me or to injure you. They are doing what makes sense to them, and a lot of times they're acting out of an anger and they're trying to neutralize a situation. When people get really angry, sometimes they become embarrassed by it and they try to, downplay it, or else they actually amplify it. I was telling you about my brother, and when he got angry because of what my older brother did, he went ballistic as a way to demonstrate how badly he felt violated. But the problem is when anybody comes at you with anger, we generally become defensive and protective, or we just discredit them. So it doesn't actually have almost any positive effect to express the anger in that way, in the sort of the heat of the moment. It doesn't yield what we hope to. Interestingly enough, we're striving to be people on the path who do respond well to that anger, because we want to act out of a higher consciousness. So if somebody goes ballistic on me, I want to be able to recognize the nugget of truth in which they were, the place in which they felt violated, and be able to validate that, even if they're, bathing me in insults, because I know that those insults are not really personal. Now, who's a master of this? I suppose Jesus is a master of it. When somebody is laying this stuff on you, it's very difficult to maintain that, because there's an energy in anger which is, quite violent. So being able to feel all that stirring and then still maintain the consciousness of love, that's difficult. But we're striving to get there by changing our understanding. And that's sort of the foundation of what this path is about, is our understanding of life and love and God and ourselves and what it means to be a soul and our emotional systems. The understanding of those things are going to change. So one of the first things we have to do when we are angry is we teach ourselves to go, in this moment, I don't really know what is true. Now that is an expression of humility, because what is more the norm? This person did this thing for me, and I'm entitled to go ballistic on them. I'm entitled to express my anger. I'm entitled to, flip them the bird. I'm entitled to write them off out of my life. I've already decided what exactly happened. But when you become emotionally agitated, it's very important to realize that you probably have lost touch with the truth. You know, I think about a situation when two people get fired. How come they don't have the exact same response to being fired? One person might go, yeah, I know I was slacking off. I knew it was coming. Yeah, I guess this is right. The other person is just outraged. Why do people have such different responses? Because their belief system is different. And some people might go, I was taught to be responsible, so if I started to slack off, then I go, yeah, I'm responsible for eliciting this, this firing. Another person may have grown up in a situation where their parents did not teach responsibility. By their actions, they were narcissistic, they were victim mentality, and so their foundation for their belief system is like, I'm going to be victimized, just like my parents were. And so there isn't the moment of stopping and going like, did I elicit this in some way? So this is what our consciousness is we're going to outgrow the belief system that was corrupted, and we're going to go, okay, before I respond, before I react, I'm going to reflect on this and try to understand what is the kernel of truth here. Because people don't get mad for no reason. People do not come at you with random, there's always a reason. And we're looking to find that nugget of truth in there. Again, the high consciousness of love is to honor that truth. And that can be very painful to see, to go like, okay, yes, because then we want to go, yeah, but that doesn't give you the right to blah, blah, blah. Well, they do have the right to. As human beings with free will, they have the right to do what they want. We also have the right to communicate a boundary. And that is very much a part of managing anger. But we want to recognize the truth, and we want to be quick to own, like Jesus said, if there's something that your accuser has against you, stop your worshiping at the altar. Don't worry about being all high and mighty with your spiritual practices. Let's go and take care of what's important. Let's go help alleviate this person who's probably suffering because of their, when you're angry, you ever been angry with somebody who you live with, and it's just like you can't be yourself. You're in a type of a prison. You see them and you don't want to be angry, but you have to be angry because if you're not angry, then you're sort of, you're relinquishing your position. I mean, there's a lot of twistedness about this. That's why I live alone. But anyway. No, I mean, I remember when I was in, relationships, and, when we were angry at each other, it's just painful. It's like, I wish the person would apologize. I wish the person would get it. Or I wish I could just let go of this. I mean, here they are, they're pleading with me to let it go, and I can't because there's just something inside of me that is just, it's a prison. We don't want to live in that prison. The way out is through consciousness, and there's going to be usually a chafing against our pride, because in the perfect world, the person apologizes to us, or they recognize that we were right, or some sort of scenario comes forth. We're going, love trumps righteousness. So the loving thing to do is to find relief for ourselves and relief for the other person. And generally, we're going to identify the truth. We're going to recognize in meditation, this is all happening inwardly, and recognize that, try to figure out what exactly happened, to what degree am I embellishing it because, I'm wounded in this way, or my belief system is, somebody is violating what I believe, but actually the truth is that they did not. There's, like in the situation where two people get fired and they both were irresponsible, the one goes, I'm being victimized. Well, that's not actually true. But they're reading it through that filter. So consciousness will help us to reduce those filters to begin to see the truth. And that really stings the ego, because it's kind of like, oh man, I was so righteous about my version of the truth, and now I actually see it. And that's one of the things that makes the path difficult. If you sit with a priest and the priest goes, well, tell me what happened here, what was your intent, and what really were you thinking? And there's the squirming, well, I didn't really, but then you kind of go, yeah, I didn't care. Or I did consciously do that. Or I didn't respond to that email because I didn't feel like it. Oh, okay. So you can see why. Because people are very sensitive in their ability to read the energy. They may not know exactly what happened. But, like I was sharing with you in the situation with my brother. My older brother sent something over that was kind of offensive. And then my younger brother went crazy. Because he sensed that, the nugget of truth was that, the guideline my older brother made was not really kind and not really considerate. So people are going to be very sensitive to the energies we put out. And this is why we don't retaliate, we don't come at people from this place of anger, because it doesn't lead to the resolution that we want. What it may lead to is creating suffering for that other person. And yes, there's an egotistical part of us that wants that. But Jesus as the example was like, we don't do that, because the buck has to stop somewhere. We have to terminate the anger in our meditation practice. Find out what is true. Own the things that we did. Go like what in reflecting, I realized that this message I sent you, or really you had asked me this and I didn't, or I was sort of indifferent to your request, or I was really hoping for this and I see now that because you didn't do it, I kind of decided to retaliate in a passive-aggressive way. And that, I think, is worthy of an apology. To say, I struck back at you, I don't feel good about that. To say, listen, I got really angry when you said this, or when you didn't do this, or when you showed up late, or when you didn't respond the way you said, I think that's fine. I'm owning my feeling on it. But I don't want to retaliate. I want my inner mantra to be, let's see if we can resolve this. Now, sometimes you won't get to resolution because the people are not striving for the same consciousness. And remember what the world is promoting. The world is promoting like, oh yeah, well check this out. That kind of energy, right? It's like, a lot of TV shows are based upon, I think of these reality shows and they're just putting people together in situations that are going to be inflammatory and reactionary just so we can all sit back and go, oh my God, look at these losers. It's really sad and kind of pathetic. So the world is promoting emotional drama, and Jesus is promoting the opposite. Let's resolve the drama because somebody is always suffering in the drama. So as you go forth now, remember we talked about, I was sharing, I would like the Sunday services and the Bible classes to give good fuel for your meditation. So you can begin to look at, how do I typically respond when I get angry? Do I actually go through a linear process? First of all, do I force myself to sit there and go, I'm really angry. I don't deny it. I don't negate it. I don't suppress it. I go, yes, I'm really angry. Okay, now I got to go, what exactly happened? Here's the version that I perceived happening, and here's the truth. And I've got to bridge that gap. And over time, as your spiritual faculties open, there'll be a smaller and smaller gap. So you'll begin to recognize immediately, oh, here is the actual truth. I'm getting all worked up because, I can't believe that somebody would do this. It's just so against how I would ever be. But just let's have a little bit more room for other people to be different than us. I recognize the truth. Then I seek the responsibility. How did I contribute to this? That's going to crush your pride, and that's a beautiful thing on the path. Because if I want to go as far as I can see, I did everything right. It's very rare that that's the case. Sometimes it is the case. But if somebody was working with me, I would go, well, did you examine very thoroughly to determine if you had any responsibility in it? And if somebody says, I didn't do it that thorough, but it was obvious. I'm like, go back in. Go back in and be very meticulous and try to identify. This is an element of the purity that we're seeking. We're seeking to be pure in our intent, but most of us are not. Okay, we're not going to hate on ourselves because of it, but we're going to identify if my intent had a little bit of a jabbiness to it, or a little bit of a laziness to it, or a little bit of a selfishness to it, or a little bit of an indifference to it. It may be appropriate then to apologize to the other person, or at least next time you receive communion, just go, Jesus, I'm really sorry, I get it now, please forgive me. Receive the communion, lift it, beautiful. We're off and running. And then, if we need to communicate with the individual that caused us anger, we do so in a relaxed way that's about conflict resolution. It's not about making sure the person knows what a jerk they are. That's not going to help at all. We love the person, and we recognize that they're struggling in their own process as well. So we're going to try to make it easier for them by starting off with taking responsibility for the part of us that was off. And I've done this many times, and sort of, there's a hope that the person will go like, oh, I reflected on it and I realized I did this. And then the whole thing just crumbles. There's no more anger. It's like, yes, we're human beings. We both erred. I'm sorry. Oh, you too. Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, well, let's hug and let's try not to do it again. Okay, let's go forth. And that's a nice thing. And then it's gone. And then you can sit face to face with a person and there isn't this tremendous tension. So we're out of prison now.